After hours and hours of arguments with my Democratic colleagues, not because I woke up this morning with a strong desire to hear my own voice for as long as I could on the Senate floor, but I am here because decades before I ever considered a career in politics, when I was just starting out in the Army, I raised my right hand and took an oath. I swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I vowed to protect our nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and in this moment, at this precipice in our country, I need to make good on that promise. Because in the just 18 days since Donald Trump was inaugurated, we have witnessed an all-out assault on the system of checks and balances that our government was founded upon. We have seen the president both overreach and underdeliver, proving through executive orders and Twitter marching orders that he cares more about the billionaires who belong to Mar-a-Lago than the middle-class folks he pretended to care about on the campaign trail. Look, 250 years ago this April, a few brave patriots grabbed their muskets and risked their lives at Lexington and Concord, sacrificing for a country that was still more of an ideal than actual reality. They did so because they could no longer stand living under a tyrannical leader. They did so because they had dreamt up the notion of a government of, by, and for the people, and they knew that a system based on checks and balances was the best way to keep this nation's leaders from turning into the very kind of tyrant they'd fled England to escape. A system of checks and balances. Well, 2 weeks into Trump's America, the only checks I see are the ones going into the pockets of Trump's rich friends. The only balance I see is Trump's balancing act between ripping off the middle class and endangering our national security. Our system of government is being eroded before our eyes. It's being perverted to work for the few, the billionaires, rather than the many, the people. And it is sickening to see so many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle put their hands over their eyes and pretend they don't see what's happening. They are refusing to speak up as our president turns into more of a despot every day, as his power grabs get more extreme, more insidious, more cruel. Even if we took the full 30 hours of debate on this nomination, I don't think we could get through all the ways that Trump's absolute disregard for the rule of law over the past 2 weeks has already harmed America and Americans. But let me use my time to try. Last week, news broke that Trump had declared a blanket freeze on all federal grants, ignoring the fact that Congress had already appropriated those funds, ignoring that he point blank did not have the authority to do so, ignoring that his action would and already has hurt countless folks who rely on these grants for their most basic needs. President Trump may think that he owned the libs by causing havoc in our federal government, but what he's really done is create a reality where his own voters who depend on groups like Meals on Wheels are not sure how they're going to put food on the table next week. He may think he destroyed woke culture with this freeze, but no, he didn't. Instead, he manufactured a crisis that has left that single mom working a double shift in a South Side nursing home unsure whether her Medicaid will be stripped away in the dark of night. He's created a crisis that has left veterans wondering if they'll be able to access the benefits they earned with the blood they were brave enough to shed for our country. He's fabricated a nightmarish reality where homeless shelters might have to close their doors and turn back onto the streets the very at-risk teenagers who rely on their care. Listen, when I was in high school, my family struggled. My dad lost his job and was unemployed for 4 to 5 years. We eventually ran through all of our savings, and we ended up with no money, and some days we had no food. I still remember going to the grocery store and counting out our last 5 $1 food stamps to buy as much bread and bologna as possible, then praying we'd have enough to last the week. I still remember fainting from hunger in my high school English class, waking up on the floor, disoriented, not knowing what had happened. I still remember the hours my dad spent walking from payphone to payphone, hoping to find 10 cents at a time so that he could find enough so that my brother and I could each get 50 cents to buy lunch and breakfast at school that next afternoon. A lot of times, that 25-cent hot lunch at school was the only meal I could count on for that entire day. So as a former hungry kid, and now as a mom of 2 little girls, I cannot imagine the pain of parents who rely on school meals to feed their own kids, and who are now terrified that Trump's vanity project of a federal freeze will force their 5-year-old to go hungry, as the Grandstead Fund cafeteria meal programs may now get gutted. Shame on Donald Trump. And shame on Republicans who can't seem to find the ounce of courage necessary to stand up and say what all of us in this chamber so obviously know, that this is wrong, that this is outrageous, and that this is a wild, unlawful abuse of power. But Trump didn't stop with the grant freeze. Last weekend, he gave Elon Musk, the world's richest person, someone not elected by the people of the United States of America, the power to cut off aid from the world's most vulnerable people. He gave him the authority to dismantle an entire agency in one illegal, fell swoop. Together, they are now actively gutting USAID, completely undermining the United States' national security and global standing, knowingly, intentionally jeopardizing the safety of countless innocent people worldwide who rely on the organization for humanitarian assistance. Now, bad actors in the Communist People's Republic of China and Russia will be able to step in to fill the leadership vacuum that Trump created, forcing folks in need across the world to turn to our adversaries and not us for help. Let me be clear. USAID is an organization dedicated to doing good around the globe, but the good that it does also has a direct, tangible impact on the safety and economic security of families right here at home in the United States. It is an organization that helps allies detect fentanyl, in part so we can stop it before that fentanyl comes across our own borders. It's an organization that helps feed starving families worldwide, but it does so using $2 billion of food purchased from American farmers, with the paychecks going into their red, white, and blue pockets so they can keep their family farms for yet another generation. It is an organization that helps stop global pandemics. And it's an organization that works to make sure that the poorest children in the poorest countries don't die from drinking dirty water. A mission that also happens to be critical to our national strength, as when countries experience water insecurity, they're more likely to undergo political instability as well. And that increases the odds that their governments fail and power falls into the wrong hands, leading into a sequence of events that often ends up with the kind of immigration crisis we're already facing at our border. I know there is waste, fraud, and abuse in our government, and I am all for rooting that out. In fact, I've written and passed legislation that has successfully done just that. But eliminating an entire agency with such vital missions is not the way to go about this. USAID makes up just 1% of our federal budget, and these short-sighted cuts will end up costing the American taxpayer even more in the long term, as there will be more global instability, more migration crises, more pandemics to contend with as a result of this frankly idiotic decision. It's ironic. The guy charged with making our government more efficient is making it more costly and more chaotic. Case in point, he's threatening to use American troops to bring home USAID workers if they don't leave their overseas posts in the next 30 days, a move that in itself would cost Americans an estimated $100 million. That's Elon Musk spending $100 million more dollars, not saving it. Elon Musk is unelected, unvetted, and unqualified. He does not have the legal authority to dismantle entire agencies. Yet, in Trump's America, he's almost a co-equal president. And the size of his bank account and how far he is willing to bend the knee is enough for our president to bestow on him unchecked power. Musk is willing to bow down to Trump's throne made of fool's gold and false promises. So in return, Elon gets to run wild, run rampant. He, for some reason, gets to have full access to Americans' social security numbers and veterans' personal information. For what reason? No one knows, and all of us should fear. He gets to hijack our systems to enrich himself rather than the middle class. He gets to stomp on those in need, then fire anyone who dares to stand up for what's right or what's legal. Trump and Musk are not bringing back the good old days of Ronald Reagan. Reagan believed in international aid. Reagan is the one whose name is on the front of USAID's building. They aren't making America great. They're making it authoritarian. And we should all be asking ourselves, if we let them gut USAID, then what is next? The answer is the Department of Education, and then your Social Security, your Medicaid, the things that you and your families need to get by are right behind on their list to take out. Look, Trump ran his campaign on the idea of lowering costs for the middle class. I support lowering costs in the middle class. He said he'd reverse inflation on day one. I would love to see him reverse inflation on day one, or whatever day we're on now. Well, day one has come and gone, so has day 2, day 3, day 4. Here we are, weeks in, and all he's done is break his campaign promises and then take actions that have hurt everyday Americans to help his rich buddies afford yet another private jet. Under his wide stewardship, egg prices have actually skyrocketed. Inflation remains sky high. A needless trade war seems to be getting closer every day, which could raise the price of gas and groceries even further. And all of us are in greater danger from bad actors the world over. Enough is enough. Enough was enough a long time ago. Donald Trump is unchecked. The scales of our government have become unbalanced. Every day, those scales tip more and more away from serving the needs of the working class and toward feeding the greed of the billionaires who pal around with the president on his golf course. It was Ronald Reagan who once said, and I quote, "The genius of our constitutional system is its recognition that no one branch of government alone could be relied on to preserve our freedoms. The great safeguard of our liberty is the totality of the constitutional system with no one part getting the upper hand." Reagan also described the Constitution as, and I quote, a covenant that he said, "We have made not only with ourselves, but with all of mankind," end quote. So today I am asking my Republican colleagues to honor the covenant so cherished by their own conservative hero, Ronald Reagan. I am asking them to heed his words, to heed his warning, to heed his plea to us all. Under Donald Trump, our government is not of, by, or for the people. It is of, by, and for the people with the deepest pockets. E pluribus unum, out of many one, is supposed to signify the strength of our nation, the solidarity of our nation. Do not let Donald Trump pervert it to mean that out of the many people, he and his buddies are the only ones who matter. To my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, all I'm asking you to do today is the jobs you were elected to do. All I am begging for is that you make good on the oath you took when you were first sworn into this chamber to support and defend our Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Trump is acting as if he believes that the Constitution is just an old, yellowing piece of paper that he can crumble up at his will. My colleagues, you know better, and you know your constituents deserve better. Please find the courage to stand up and say so. It's the least each of us can do for the country that we are lucky enough to have been elected to protect. You can do that today by voting no on Trump's latest unqualified, unfit cabinet nominee, Russell Vought, a man who doesn't even care to hide that he will happily rubber stamp Trump's worst instincts. Now, I'd like to take some time to illustrate the very real impact that Trump's illegal actions have already had on the middle-class Americans. And I want to begin by reading some of the many, many letters I've received over the past few weeks from my constituents in Illinois. First, let's start with Trump's federal funding freeze. Here is a message we received from Metro Chicago's YWCA, an organization that supports the delivery of over $10 million worth in Head Start funding to child care providers. Taking funding away from our child care providers and families is both cruel and counterproductive. It hurts our families, our businesses, and our economy. This is what the YWCA said. YWCA Metropolitan Chicago partners with 19 child care center providers to enroll 621 children in the Head Start and Early Head Start program. Many of these centers are mom and pop small businesses. Due to the callous and irresponsible federal funding freeze yesterday, YWCA was unable to access the payment portal for these critical programs for several hours. They heard our child care centers across the service population were frozen out from receiving direct payments as well. Payments these centers depend on to make payroll, feed children, and provide other resources to children and parents. Child care centers in Illinois are scared. Child care centers across the country are scared. The child care businesses that YWCA serves typically survive on profit margins of less than 1%. Wages are astonishingly low, with child care workers making less than 98% of the nation's other workers. They don't have the funds to float their employees while the president attempts to threaten our national security and deny resources for states, localities, American families, and businesses. The harm has already been done even with that temporary funding freeze, and it cannot be undone. The at-risk children of the YWCA serves with Head Start and Early Head Start funds include those living in poverty, children in foster care, children experiencing homelessness, people of color, and children with disabilities. Their parents and caregivers are hardworking taxpayer Americans. When they don't have access to quality child care, the Federal Reserve tells us that child care problems are the main barrier to job seeking, the main reason for missed work, and the main reason for part-time work. Next, I received several messages from my constituents after they were locked out of their Medicaid accounts in the aftermath of Trump's illegal federal freeze. Here's what Medicaid means for them. From a single mom in Central Illinois. Medicaid provides a quality of life for my disabled son, including many services and support that I, as a single parent of over 25 years, would not be able to provide for him otherwise. From a parent in Southern Illinois. Alex's genetic disability requires many doctor's visits and tests and medication. She also requires physical therapy and occupational therapy. She will always require a caregiver. Medicaid provides caregivers. In the future, Medicaid will provide day programs when I am not physically able to care for her and her brother becomes her guardian. Medicaid provides for needs now so she can have a good life and will provide for her needs in the future. As a parent of a child with a disability, this relieves our stress. As a parent who won't live forever, it gives us peace of mind to know she has these services to live a fulfilling life. From a parent in Newton, Illinois, Medicaid has been a lifeline for our family for the past 2 years. My daughter has a rare condition called Aicardi syndrome. She suffers from a whole slew of medical issues. Medicaid pays for nursing that our primary insurance does not cover. The state allows me to be paid as her nurse, so we are able to financially pay for our daily needs, home and wheelchair van to transport our daughters. Without Medicaid, we would not have access to medications, equipment, supplies, and nursing. These are the things that keep my daughter alive. From a parent in Chicago, my child has a rare genetic disorder. She is medically fragile and technology dependent. She requires 24 hours care and is unable to do anything for herself. Medicaid allows my family to survive financially by covering all of the health-related costs. Without Medicaid, we would drown in debt and my daughter would have to live in a hospital, costing the taxpayers even more money. From a parent in Elburn, Illinois, Medicaid helps me to care for my daughter at home, where she belongs. It provides for critical support that Ava needs, ventilator care, nursing, and medical supplies, so she can grow, learn, and thrive with her family. Without Medicaid and the MFTD waiver, keeping Ava home would not be possible. It allows us to give her every opportunity to reach her full potential while keeping our family together. Medicaid isn't just a program, it's a lifeline for families like ours. Now, I'd like to read some messages from some of the healthcare providers, researchers, and patients in my state who are worried about how the Trump freeze will impact their lives. One constituent said, "I am a cancer survivor, thanks to research into early detection of and into the treatment of cancer. Currently, I have a friend who is at Vanderbilt Medical Center for the treatment of his leukemia. I have another friend who is undergoing chemo for blood cancer and will go to Vanderbilt for a months-long treatment in May. Reports say that all communications and grant reviews, as well as all cancer research or trials, have been stopped by the Trump administration. And I ask you to do everything in your power to restart the cancer research and trials so that lives are not lost. Thank you for your help. Another emailed me, my uncle has a genetic disorder. My cousins have a 50-50 chance of having some issue. My uncle has been in several studies at Wash U in St. Louis, Missouri. They are working to identify what causes this gene and then consequently how to treat it. The new administration has halted all meetings and grant reviews by the NIH. This funding is vital, capitalized vital, to researching what causes and how to treat so many diseases, including the one my uncle is suffering from. Please push to fully fund the NIH so that we can continue to research and treat terrible diseases that could impact all of us and our families. Next, here's a message I received about how the Trump freeze could hurt staff, researchers, and students at Southern Illinois University. Southern Illinois University estimates that they have approximately 550 employees who are paid fully or partially through federal dollars. A pause in funding in the programs they lead and research and the research that they perform in important areas like treating and preventing Alzheimer's disease or ensuring that the food we eat is safe to consume would keep them from earning a salary to support their families. The TRIO Upward Bound program in East St. Louis currently serves 225 participants between both programs, the majority of whom come from low-income, first-generation, college-bound families. These students already face significant challenges, including academic barriers, limited access to resources, and a lack of college preparation support. Any freeze in the federal funding will stop the university's ability to effectively assist them in overcoming these obstacles. The Upward Bound program plays a crucial role in preparing students for college, providing tutoring, college admissions guidance, and mentorship, which were at risk due to the funding freeze. Additionally, our dedicated staff who work tirelessly to support these students face uncertainty regarding their employment. This disruption also affects our broader community, as our program serves as a vital resource for encouraging educational advancement and economic mobility. Next, here's an excerpt from an email I got from Ignite Promise, a Chicago nonprofit serving homeless youth in the immediate aftermath of the Trump freeze. The nonprofit had to reach into their own wallet to keep up their work. They said that the freeze turned their sector, and I quote, upside down. This is their message to me. Thankfully, we were able to carry out our commitments to youth over the last 24 hours because we have a small funding reserve. However, if this is not resolved, these are direct services Ignite offers to youth that are at risk. Essential mental health services and housing for over 500 young people throughout our programs. Youth ages 14 to 17 who are victims of trafficking will lose access to our 24/7 shelter. Young people at the greatest risk of harm will lose access to a 24/7 crisis hotline. This freeze turned our sector upside down and shifted over 100 providers in our COC to rush into emergency mode. And the most devastating effect was the fear youth experience, assuming their safe and stable supports were going away and insecurity our hardworking staff felt for their employment. Now I'd like to share a message we received from Beyond Legal Aid Chicago after they learned Trump's freeze would impact their work as a nonprofit that provides legal services to underserved communities and veterans throughout the city of Chicago. Their message reads, first, when the freeze went into place, the notice of funding opportunity for homeless veterans legal services was put on hold. Without that funding, we will be unable to serve veterans in getting access to the benefits like the ones featured in this story. Our client was a 57-year-old veteran suffering from service-connected disabilities faced challenges navigating the VA system. His efforts for a disability upgrade had been denied, preventing him and his family from accessing critically needed support. He met our staff at one of our veterans' legal clinics. With our legal advocacy, he was actually successfully upgraded to 100% and total disability status. He is now protected from a rating reduction by the VA. We raise his monthly benefits. He is now entitled to an additional benefits, DEA, CHAP VA for spouse and children, no cost for VA health care, VA dental care, and a DOD ID card for him and his family to access basis. His children are now eligible for education assistance up to $107,136 for their college education. This family's financial situation was stabilized solidly, keeping them in the middle class by recognizing that what this veterans services cost him. In 2024, using federal funding, we were able to work in partnership with a home ownership preservation organization in the south suburbs to save 64 homes from a foreclosure. That's 64 families who now have $19 million plus in preserved home value and can pass along the homes to the next generation. Our legal work saved 64 families from homelessness. Without federal funding that supported that work, those homes would likely have been lost and those families would have faced housing instability. Over the course of our 3-year OVW Legal Assistance for Victims, which we received through the Department of Justice, was the principal funding source for our work serving 286 survivors of sexual assault. They say further that all of that work and more is funded directly by non-LSC federal grants, all of which was subject to Donald Trump's freeze. Trump's freeze even impacted members of law enforcement in Illinois. Trump loves to say that he backs the blue and that Democrats want to defund the police. But in reality, it's his actions that are taking money away from our law enforcement officers and public safety, not to mention him pardoning January 6 people from January 6 who actually assaulted the blue, our campus police officers. In the aftermath of Trump's freeze, police departments reached out saying that their high-intensity drug trafficking area, the HITA offices, were notified that they may lose funding. The High-Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Program provides support for law enforcement agencies operating in areas determined to be critical drug trafficking regions across the United States. Illinois is part of two of these regions. They provide crucial assistance, especially to rural agencies, to combat gangs, cartels, and the proliferation of fentanyl in our communities, as well as those that surround us in places like Indiana, Missouri, Kentucky, Iowa. Remember that the next time Republicans claim they say they back the blue, they're actually not backing the blue. Now I'd like to read a list of federal programs that could be at risk if Donald Trump proceeds with his freeze, and make clear how it would affect the lives of the tens of millions of Americans who depend on them. Let's begin with Head Start. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes federal funding for Head Start programs that provide comprehensive early childhood education for more than 800,000 kids and their families. Teachers and staff might not get paid and programs may not be able to stay open. In K-12 schools, Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes federal funding for our K-12 schools because school districts may not be able to access key formula grant funding, including Title I, IDEA, Impact Aid, and Career and Technical Education, which would pose tremendous financial burdens on schools in the middle of the school year. Food assistance programs. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes funding for millions of American citizens who rely on nutrition assistance programs like SNAP, WIC, and school lunch. These Americans would be left hungry as funding is cut off, and nonprofits who provide additional assistance would lose federal funding. And some of that funding, especially for SNAP and WIC and school lunches, actually are spent purchasing from our Americans' farmers, so who would also be negatively affected. Disaster relief. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes funding for public assistance and hazard mitigation grants from the Disaster Relief Fund to state, tribal, territorial, and local governments and nonprofits that help communities quickly respond to, recover from, and prepare for major disasters. Right as so many communities are struggling after severe natural disasters, most recently in California, Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina. Public safety. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes federal grants for law enforcement and homeland security activities, undermining public safety in every state and territory. Health services. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes federal funding for community health centers that provide health care for over 30 million Americans, creating chaos for patients trying to get their prescriptions, regular checkups, and more. Veterans care. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes federal grants to help veterans in rural areas access health care and grants that help veterans get other critical services, including suicide prevention, resources, transition assistance, and housing for homeless veterans. Support for out service members. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes support for a host of DoD financial assistance and grant programs supporting service members and their families, including the Fisher House, Impact Aid, Community Noise Mitigation, ROTC language training, STEM programs, and the USO. Preventing domestic violence. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes all Violence Against Women Act grants, as well as funding for victims' assistance and state and local police. 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes funding for the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, as well as grants from mental health services. Life-changing medical research. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes all funding for critical health research, including research on cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and diabetes, as well as clinical trials at the NIH Clinical Center and all across the country, disrupting life-saving and often time-sensitive research. Support for small businesses. Donald Trump's illegal freeze would mean that the Small Business Administration would have to halt loans to small businesses, including those in disaster-ravaged communities in North Carolina, Texas, and Florida. Emergency preparedness. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes critical preparedness and response capability funding used to prepare for disasters, public health emergencies, and chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear events. Support for firefighters. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes grants to support firefighters across the country. This includes grants that help states and localities purchase essential firefighting equipment. Good-paying jobs in the energy infrastructure. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes grants for critical energy projects nationwide, halting billions of dollars in investments nationwide and jeopardizing good-paying American jobs. The Department of Energy Loan Program Office would halt loans in 28 states, impacting hundreds of thousands of construction and operations jobs. Infrastructure projects. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes all federally funded transportation projects across the country, roads, bridges, public transit, and more, including projects already under construction. Combating the fentanyl crisis. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes funding for communities to address the substance use disorder crisis and combat the fentanyl crisis. Programs for American innovation and competitiveness. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes existing grants to support research for AI and quantum computing and any new grant funding, undermining U.S. innovation and competitiveness with the communist Chinese PRC and putting American jobs at risk. Programs to strengthen our military readiness. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes grants and other assistance appropriated to strengthen military effectiveness and defense capacity, including the Defense Production Act support for the defense industrial base, basic research grants necessary to advance key technologies, and small business support to strengthen our supply chains. Programs to protect Americans overseas. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes programs that track and combat the spread of infectious diseases, create business opportunities for American companies in emerging markets, combat terrorism, and counter the influence of the PRC, Russia, and Iran. Efforts to ensure the safety and security of Americans implementing these programs are all suspended and could be terminated. Food inspections. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes whether some states will have to take on the full financial burden of ensuring the nation's meat supply is safe if federal cooperative agreements for meat inspections are halted. Support for tribes. Donald Trump's illegal freeze jeopardizes funding to tribes for basic governmental services like health care, public safety programs, tribal schools, and food assistance. Pell Grants and direct plus loans for parents. Donald Trump's illegal freeze puts Pell Grants and Parent Plus Loans programs at risk. These grants and programs make college more affordable for millions of Americans, giving them the opportunity to access to higher education and a ticket to the middle class. His reckless actions create another barrier opportunity for Americans. I'd like to switch gears a little bit, and let's talk a little bit about more campaign promises broken by Donald Trump. During his campaign, Trump constantly attacked people he called unelected bureaucrats for having too much control over the federal government. But now, Donald Trump has made Elon Musk, the world's richest man, the most powerful unelected bureaucrat of all. giving him the keys to our government and empowering him to illegally dismantle core agencies without consulting Congress. Not to mention giving him access to all of our Social Security numbers, tax information, and other personal data. As my colleague Senator Sanders pointed out on Wednesday, Elon Musk spent $277 million to elect Donald Trump president. Since Election Day, he has become $154 billion richer. Elon Musk's net worth is estimated at $426 billion. Yes, that's billion with a B. Meanwhile, the average American salary is only $63,795. The average cost of childcare for just one child per year in the United States is $9,994. The average price of a gallon of milk in our country is $4.47. The average price of eggs in America currently is $5.29 for a dozen, although it's actually increasing as we speak. The average price of gas in the US is $3.12 a gallon. In Illinois, the average person's salary is $67,192. The average cost of childcare per year for just one child in Illinois is $11,605. The average price of a gallon of milk in Illinois is $5.52. The average price for a dozen eggs in Illinois is $4.15, which is over $1 more than the national average. And the average price for a gallon of gas in Illinois is $3.26. And so you can see the disparity between the middle class and the billionaires that cozy up to Donald Trump. And it's not just Musk. Wealthy elites that have more money than most Americans could ever dream of are doing anything to get into Trump's favor because they know he plans on giving them massive tax cuts to line their pockets even further. Jeff Bezos is just one example. He's from New Mexico, and his net worth is estimated at $250 billion. Meanwhile, in New Mexico, the average person's salary is $57,512. The average cost of childcare for just one child is $8,766. The average price of a gallon of milk is $3.63. A dozen eggs would set you back $5.46, and the average price of gas is $2.98. Next up, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg. He's from New York. His net worth is estimated at $240 billion. Meanwhile, in New York, the average person's salary is $78,624. The average cost of childcare for just one child is $12,844. The average price of a gallon of milk is $5.05. The average price of eggs is $5.46, and the average price of gas is $3.18. These guys don't represent America. They have no clue what the middle class experience is. They don't care about making the government work for everyday Americans. They only care about making it work for them and their buddies. Donald Trump ran for president on the promise that he'd lower the price of eggs. However, since being in office, he seems to have conveniently forgotten that vow. He's also done nothing to stop the bird flu, which has caused the price of eggs to skyrocket even further. In fact, his freeze would stop the research into and tracking the bird flu virus that is causing eggs to skyrocket. The cost of eggs appears to have accelerated since November, the month that Donald Trump was elected president, according to the data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. In the week ending January 18th, a dozen eggs cost $5.29, a steep climb from February of 2024, when the price was a little over $3.50 a dozen. In November, the price of a dozen eggs edged up to $3.65, and then in December, it rose to $4.15. Since the moment Trump returned to the Oval Office, he has abused his power, both overreaching and under-delivering, signing executive orders and issuing commands that are blatantly illegal. Hypocrisy must be dead, because Donald Trump used to claim to care a lot about executive overreach back when there was a Democratic president in office. Here are just a few examples of when, ironically, Donald Trump was complaining about President Obama's executive actions. In 2016, this is what Trump said, and I quote, "We don't want to continue to watch people signing executive orders because that was not what the Constitution and the brilliant designers of this incredible document had in mind. We need people that can make deals and can work, because right now, in Washington, there's total, absolute gridlock." In another instance, Trump declared he doesn't want to get people together the old-fashioned way, where you get Congress, you get the Senate, you get together, you do legislation. He just writes out an executive order. Not supposed to happen that way. You get the Congress. I'm sorry that I'm butchering the English language, but I'm quoting Donald Trump directly. You get the Congress, you get the Senate, you get together, you do legislation. He just writes out an order, executive order. It's not supposed to happen that way. Another time, Donald Trump lied and said, and I quote, "I would build consensus with Congress, and Congress would agree with me. I'll give you an example, because I don't like the idea of using executive orders like our president does." He was referring, of course, to President Obama at the time. "It is a disaster what he's doing. I would build consensus, but consensus means you have to work hard, you have to cajole, you have to get them into the Oval Office and get them all together, and you have to make deals," and I end quote. There are also countless examples of other Republicans' hypocrisy when it comes to executive overreach. I just want to name one. In 2014, now House Majority Leader Steve Scalise had to say of President, in 2014, then House Majority Leader Steve Scalise had this to say of President Obama. President Obama has this fantasy that he can just use his pen to write laws. We don't have a monarchy in this country. There's an executive branch and the legislative branch, and the president has to work with Congress to get things done. Now, on to the topic of USAID and the Trump-Musk decision to gut the agency, a decision as dangerous as it is heartless as it is careless. First, I just want to correct, House Majority Leader Steve Scalise was not the majority leader when he said this. He was a member of Congress at the time. First, I'd like to read several excerpts of speeches given by Secretary Rubio in which he expressed clear support for international aid before he was confirmed. "There's no denying that a globally engaged America comes at a steep price, but a history of our still young nation is full of warnings that a lack of an American engagement comes with an even higher price of its own. Many of our nation's adversaries and rivals have been emboldened by our uncertain foreign policy. So as instability spreads and tyrants flourish, our allies want to know whether America can still be counted on to confront these common challenges, whether we will continue to be a beacon to the rest of the world. Our legacy is that of a nation that for 2 centuries has planted its feet and pushed out against the walls of tyranny, oppression, and injustice that constantly threaten to close in on the world, and has sought to replace these forces with the spread of liberty, free enterprise, and respect for human rights. These principles are also advanced by our other elements of the American influence, those that don't require any military might. For example, consider the countless lives we've saved from the scourge of AIDS in Africa through the PEPFAR program, or consider the economic mobility created by American trade and investment. These accomplishments prove that while military might may be our most eye-catching method of involvement abroad, it is far from being our most often utilized. In most cases, the decisive use of diplomacy, foreign assistance, and economic power are the most effective ways to achieve our interests and stop problems before they spiral into crisis. Marco Rubio said that. Marco Rubio, where have you gone? I would like to also share a news article about Secretary Rubio's prior comments in support of USAID from CNN. And the title is "Rubio's Years of Strong Support for USAID Stands in Contrast to His Sudden Criticism of the Aid Agency." And I'm going to read from the article. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, newly in charge of the besieged U.S. Agency for International Development, was for years a staunch supporter of its mission while in the United States Senate, reversing his views only recently as President Donald Trump and his allies have moved to dismantle the agency. But a CNN K-File review of Rubio's past comments shows he has been for more than a decade a major supporter of foreign aid and USAID, which in fiscal year 2023 distributed more than $40 billion in foreign aid to more than 160 different countries. Rubio's most recent comments directly contradicts years of support and praise he has directed towards USAID, including a tweet he posted in February of 2017 that said, and I quote, "Foreign aid is not charity. We must make sure it is well spent, but it is less than 1% of the budget and critical to our national security." During his Fox News interview Monday, Rubio also dismissed concerns that scaling USAID's presence could allow China to expand its influence in developing nations. But just 3 years ago, Rubio argued the exact opposite, urging the Biden administration in a 2022 letter to prioritize U.S. aid's funding as a key tool to counter the Chinese Communist Party's expanding global influence. We don't have to give foreign aid. We do so because it furthers our national interests. That's why we give foreign aid. Now, obviously, there's a component to foreign aid that's humanitarian in scope, and that's important too, he said in February of 2013. Foreign aid as a part of our overall budget is less than 1% of the total amount of the US government spends, Rubio said in one 2017 speech on the Senate floor. I promise you, it is going to be a lot harder to recruit someone to anti-Americanism and anti-American terrorism if the United States of America is the reason that person is alive today. Anybody who tells you that we can slash foreign aid and that that will bring us to balance is lying to you. Foreign aid is less than 1% of our budget. It's just not true, he added in August 2019 while speaking to the Forum Club of the Palm Beaches. Foreign aid is a very cost-effective way not only to export our values and our example, but to advance our security and our economic interests, Marco Rubio said in April of 2012 to the Brookings Institute. As a senator, Rubio also introduced legislation in 2013 and 2015 to make foreign assistance programs more transparent. A version of the bill was later passed in 2016. A lot of times, he said, people say, well, cut foreign aid. Foreign aid is less than 1% of our budget, but foreign aid can make a difference when properly used. And if you ever have the chance to travel, go to the African continent and you will meet people who are alive today because the American taxpayer funded antiviral HIV medications that kept them alive. It will not be easy to radicalize people who are alive because the American taxpayers saved their lives and the lives of their children, Rubio said while on the presidential campaign trail in late 2015. Where is Secretary Rubio's enthusiasm for USAID now? Time and time again, we see Republicans reversing their stance. Even members of the Trump administration who just a week or so ago said that they supported programs like USAID, like Marco Rubio, who now have reversed their position. Do I need to stop you the floor? Mr. President, at this time, I will end my remarks. Thank you.